Так, ребята, мы сейчас смотрим президентские выборы, то есть заместители президентов, вице-президенты, как их называют еще, vice-president, это значит Трампа вице-президент, это Майк Пенс, и Байдена вице-президент будет у нас Камала Харис. Камала Харис. Итак, значит, начинаем. Я вам буду переводить и смотреть, ну вот, чтобы было все понятно, кому интересно. И ведущая, ее имя не знаю.
You will then have 2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate. Then we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the issue. At that point, although there will always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic. We want a debate that is lively, but Americans also deserve a discussion that is civil. These are tumultuous times, but we can and will have a respectful exchange about the big issues facing our nation. Let's begin with the ongoing pandemic that has cost our country so much.
Давайте начнем с пандемии, которая стоила нам столько много нашей стране.
Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots?
Что будет делать Байден, если станет президентом? Будет ли продолжать локдаун, то есть будем сидеть дома, или будем продолжать стараться выйти из кризиса? В общем, какие действия Байдена, так как у нас сейчас много очень было кейсов и больных, и умерших. 210 тысяч погибших за последние много месяцев. Много бизнесов закрыто.
We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing.
Более 30 миллионов отправили заявку на безработицу. Вице-президент и президент, они были информированы, что это серьезный вирус, это будет касаться молодых людей также. И они знали, что происходит. И они вам не сказали. 28 января они уже знали об этом. Президент сказал, что это была утка. Можешь одевать маску, не одевать маску. В общем, президент отнесся к этому просто.
That is the plan that Joe Biden has and that I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on, and we need to save our country.
Нам надо сохранить государство, сделать бесплатную вакцину, чтобы у всех было все хорошо, и следовать плану или примеру какому-то. Процент заболевших и погибших почти в 2,5 раза больше, чем в любой другой стране. Почему у нас процент гораздо выше, чем в любой другой стране? Спасибо всем. Спасибо Юте. Спасибо Харис, ведущая. У нас очень тяжелый год был. С первого дня здоровье было на первом месте.
people who had returned from China. President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done. And that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world. Now,
Закрыли границу с Китаем
Biden
сразу же.
opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. But I can tell you, having led the White House Coronavirus Task Force, that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World War II. And I believe it saved hundreds of thousands of American lives.
И они сохранили сотни тысяч жизней американцев.
Million tests have been done to date. We were able to see to the delivery of billions of supplies so our doctors and nurses had the resources support they needed.
Все получали помощь, всех тех, кто стали на передовой, медсестры, люди, тесты миллионами происходили. В общем, всем было... И десятки миллионов вакцин будет до конца этого года, будут свободны, в смысле, готовы.
When I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless American lives.
Senator Harris. Would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the
Харрис,
vice
хочешь ли
president
ответить?
the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked.
То, что они сделали, не сработало. 210 тысяч мертвых людей, американской жизни.
And you know, the vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned.
Если бы они знали 28 января, как серьезно это все было, даже заместитель президента должен был действовать правильно. Они были что-то слишком спокойны.
How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm were you?
Были ли вы спокойны? Вопрос, когда вам не хватало туалетной бумаги. Были ли вы спокойны, что ваши дети вернутся в школу? Так, президент Пенс отвечает.
But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made. The reality, if I may finish that, the reality is Dr. Fauci said everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people. Now, President Trump, I will tell you, has boundless confidence in the American people, and he always spoke with confidence that we'd get through this together. But when you say it hasn't worked, when Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March, they said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy, that we could lose 2.2 million Americans.
Если бы Трамп не закрыл пол Америки, половину штатов, у нас было бы 2 миллиона погибших.
For the sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first, our doctors, our nurses, our first responders.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8 months.
Вопрос такой она задала. Если вы сами не смотрите за собой, то есть не одеваете маски, ходите на мероприятия и все вместе тусуетесь, и сами же, как президент Трамп, заболел ковидом, то как вы хотите подать пример людям, как на передовой вы, государство, вы самые главные, как вы, в общем, можете дать пример какой-то другим людям? Ну, что это за бред такой? Ну, то есть вот такого рода вопрос у нее прозвучал. Естественно, он отвечает. Сейчас, просто я хотел...
Given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic,
мы уверены в американцах, что...
heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day. We surged resources to New Jersey and New York and New Orleans and Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak in the Sun Belt happened this summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
Thank you, Vice President.
If I may say, that Rose Garden event, there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there, and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan, actually were tested for coronavirus, and it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly, routinely advise. The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care,
Thank you,
the Green New Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk about respecting the American people. You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage to be a leader speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on information that if you had as a parent, if you had as a worker known you didn't have enough money saved up, and now you're standing in a food line because of the ineptitude of an administration.
В общем, она ему говорит, что вы, президенция Трампа, не говорили правду, и сейчас люди, американцы, должны стоять за продуктами в очереди, где раздают продукты бесплатные. Вы не сэкономили денег, то есть... В общем, они не дали правильную информацию, которую нужно было дать родителям, которые бы они распорядились и могли как-то себя обезопасить. Половина американцев говорят, они не хотят. Половина американцев не хотят вакцину в себе вбивать. И вопрос такой, будет ли эта вакцина правильная, ну или как бы там здоровая, и сама ли бы ты взяла эту вакцину, смогла бы себе применить. Блин, я стараюсь как могу вам переводить сразу на ходу. Она будет первая, кто эту вакцину примет.
Vice President Pence, there have been a lot of repercussions from this pandemic. In recent days, the president's diagnosis of COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of the vice president. One of you will make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. That already has raised concerns.
Ну, она задает вопрос Камала Харис. Ты будешь вице-президент самого старого президента, то есть, то бишь, Джо Байден, которому 78 лет. Трампу исполнится на инаугурации примерно 74 года. То есть, Байден будет самый старый президент США, если он станет им.
concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization.
Многие люди напряжены тем, что Байден очень старый.
In recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without him.
И она задает вопрос также Пенсу, вы не обсуждали ли с Трампом такую версию, что если Трамп будет не иметь возможности вести государство, ну или что-то с ним произойдет, случится в силу болезни какой-то или других обстоятельств, ну как вы будете действовать? В общем, такой вопрос.
Well, Susan, thank you. Although I'd like to go back.
Пенс отвечает.
I think we need to move on.
Well, thank you, but I would like to go back because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time, in unheard of time, in less than a year.
У нас вакцина будет меньше, чем через год.
In phase 3 clinical trials, and we're right now producing tens of millions of doses. So
10 миллионов доз уже прорабатывается.
If the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives. The reality is that we will have a vaccine.
Перестань играть с жизнями людей.
We'll have the capacity to save countless American lives, and your continuous undermining of confidence in a vaccine is just unacceptable. And let me also say, you know, the reality is when you talk about failure in this administration, we actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal as the coronavirus. But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu.
16 миллионов заразились свиным гриппом.
In 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives.
В 2009 году, если бы Джо Байден был вице-президент, мы бы потеряли 2 миллиона человек.
It was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong. And we learned from that. They left the strategic national stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan, but we still learned from it. And I think the American people, I'm going to say again, can be proud of what we have done. And Senator, please stop undermining confidence in a vaccine.
Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked Vice President Pence.
Дай-ка мне задать такой же вопрос, который я задала Майк Пенсу.
Reached an agreement with Vice President Biden about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability. And if not,
опять же, если президент не сможет делать свою работу, что вы будете делать? Обсуждали ли вы с Байденом? Сегодня позвонил Байден через Zoom.
I thought about my mother, who came to the United States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25 at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be sitting here right now, I know would make her proud.
В общем, она рассказывает своей маме, которая ее родила в какой-то больнице в Калифорнии. Джо Байден и она, их растили в похожих условиях. Ценить публичный сервис. Она была первый адвокат Сан-Франциско в дистрикте, в какой-то в штате, в каком-то городе Сан-Франциско. Second only to the United States Department of Justice. And there I took on everything from transnational criminal organizations. В общем, она рассказывает о себе, о своей карьере, как она шла вверх.
I serve in the United States Senate, is only the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate.
Она вторая черная женщина, которая была выбрана вице-президентом. Она ездила в горячие точки, она видела солдатов, она... Джо Байден попросил ее быть ею правой рукой, потому что у них похожие цели.
Thank you, Senator Harris. You know, neither President Trump nor Vice President Biden has released the sort of detailed health information that had become the modern norm until the 2016 election. And in recent days, President Trump's doctors have given misleading answers or refused to answer basic questions about his health. And my question to each of you in turn is this information voters deserve to know? Vice President Pence, would you like to go first?
Well, Susan, thank you. And,
Секундочку. Я чуть прослушал вопрос. Сейчас.
And in recent days, President Trump's doctors have given misleading answers or refused to answer basic questions about his health. And my question to each of you...
Доктор Трампа отказывается отвечать на вопросы по поводу его здоровья. Пенс.
Well, Susan, thank you. And let me say, on behalf of the president,
За президента, дай мне сказать.
how moved we've all been by the outpouring of prayers and concern for the president. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and concern that have ushered forth for every American impacted by the coronavirus. But the care the president received at Walter Reed Hospital, the White House doctors, was exceptional. And the transparency that they practiced all along the way will continue. The American people have a right to know about the health and well-being of their president, and we'll continue to do that.
Он получил очень хорошие докторов и очень хороший сервис медицины. Все хорошо.
By the broad and bipartisan support, and Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden for your expressions of genuine concern. And I also want to congratulate you, as I did on that phone call, on the historic nature of your nomination. I never expected to be on this stage 4 years ago, so I know the feeling. But the reality is, we've got an election before the American people in the midst of this challenging year, and the stakes have never been higher. I think the choice has never been clearer.
I want to give Senator
В общем, ничего важного
respond
пока.
to the same question I asked, which is, do voters have a right to know more detailed health information about presidential candidates, and especially about presidents, especially when they're facing some kind of challenge?
Absolutely, and that's why Joe Biden has been so incredibly transparent, and certainly by contrast, the president has not, both in terms of
кандидатах
records, but also
Байдена.
let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first heard about it, I literally said...
Дональд Трамп заплатил $750 таксов.
$750.
$750. По-моему, в 17-м или 16-м.
And is in debt for $400 million. And just so everyone is clear, when we say in debt, it means you owe money to somebody.
То есть он должен 400 миллионов долларов кому-то, какие-то инстанции.
Because the American people have a right to know what is influencing the president's decisions, and is he making those decisions on the best interest of the American people?
Делает ли он правильное решение? Почему он должен деньги? Почему он, в общем, Камала Харис задает вопрос.
Over many years, the one thing we all know about Joe, he puts it all out there. He is honest, he is...
Джо Байден honest, в смысле, Джо Байден честный, он все показывает, все наружу, все знают.
Well, look, I respect the fact that Joe Biden spent 47 years in public life. I respect your...
Джо Байден был 47 лет на виду в политике.
Who's a businessman, who's a job creator, who's paid tens of millions of dollars in taxes.
Трамп заплатил десятки миллионов долларов создал десятки тысяч рабочих мест.
And the president's also released literally stacks of financial disclosures the American people can review just as the
И он выпустил все свои документальные бумаги, чтобы все видели, вся публика.
Thank you, Vice President.
Turned this economy around by cutting taxes, rolling back regulation,
Thank you, Vice President.
energy, fighting for free and fair trade, and all of that's
Thank you,
on the
Vice
line
President.
if Joe
Спасибо,
Biden
хватит.
and Kamala Harris.
You know, that's a good segue into our third
Great
topic,
segue.
which is about the economy. This has been another aspect of life for Americans that's been so affected by this coronavirus. We have a jobs crisis brewing. On Friday, we learned that the unemployment rate had declined to 7.9% in September, but the job growth had stalled, and that was before the latest round of layoffs and furloughs in the airline industry at Disney and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of discouraged workers have stopped looking for work. Nearly 11 million jobs that existed at the beginning of the year haven't been replaced. Those hardest hit include Latinos,
В общем, большая безработица, 11 миллионов
Senator Harris, the
безработных.
Biden-Harris campaign has proposed new programs to boost the economy, and you would pay for that new spending by raising $4 trillion in taxes on wealthy individuals.
Байден и Харрис хотят заплатить $4 триллиона, чтобы возвратить экономику обратно и создать рабочие места.
Thank you. On the issue of the economy, I think there couldn't be a more fundamental difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes you measure the health and the strength of America's economy based on the health and the strength of the American worker.
Байден верит, что американская экономика сильная и здоровья.
Donald Trump
С другой стороны, Трамп верит, что экономика сильная и люди, чтобы люди были все богатые.
On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it. And what he'll do with the money is invest it in the American people. And through a plan that is about investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll invest in infrastructure.
Джо Байден возьмет у богатых людей, инвестирует в американцев, в средний класс.
There was a time when our country believed in science and invested in research and development so that we were an innovation leader on the globe. Joe Biden will use
Джо Байден будет инвестировать в инновацию, в учение, изучение, в ученых.
And across the board, we'll make sure that if you have student loan debt, it's cut by $10,000.
Если у тебя есть кредит студента, $10 тысяч будет меньше.
Which had the benefit of letting American corporations go offshore to do their business.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, your administration has been predicting a rapid and robust recovery, but the latest economic report suggests that's not happening. Should Americans be braced for an economic comeback that is going to take not months, but a year or more? You have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
Про экономику.
President Trump and I took office. America had gone through the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression.
Экономика была самая медленная, когда они взяли офис с Трампом. Самая слабая экономика американская 4 года назад. Трамп убавил таксы. $2000 каждая семья сохраняла в налогах.
The average household income for a family of 4 increased by $4,000 following President Trump's tax cuts. But America, you just heard.
Зарабатывать стали на $4000 американская семья. С первого дня, если Байден станет президент, он повысит налоги. Они уже возвращают на рабочие места. 11,6 миллионов рабочих мест уже возвратились.
Congress of the United States to give direct payments to families, save 50 million jobs through the Paycheck Protection Program. We literally have spared no expense to help the American people and the American worker through this. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to raise taxes. They want to bury our economy under a $2 trillion Green New Deal, which you were one of the original co-sponsors of in the United States Senate. They want to abolish fossil fuels and ban fracking, which would cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs all across the heartland.
В общем, Джо Байден с Камала Харис, они хотят потратить очень много денег, повысить таксы, и рабочих мест будет меньше.
Joe Biden wants to repeal all of the tariffs that President Trump put into effect to fight for American jobs and American workers. Joe Biden says democracy's on the ballot. Make no mistake about it, Susan. The American economy, the American comeback is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth and opportunity, 4 more years of President Donald Trump. 2021 is going to be the biggest economic year in the history of this country.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Senator Harris.
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well,
I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year. Senator,
that is absolutely not true.
Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He's been very clear about that.
Джо Байден не будет повышать налоги для тех, кто не зарабатывает больше $400 тысяч в год.
Will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But Joe Biden, on the one hand...
Потому что Джо Байден сделал экономику очень хорошую к началу, в общем, президентства Трампа и Пенса. Но сейчас Трамп и Пенс, в общем, полный трэш превратили экономику, и типа сейчас все плохо. Это говорит Камала Харис, конечно же.
Did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who was responsible with President
При Трампе самая ужасная рецессия экономики.
Barack Obama for the Affordable Care Act, which brought health care to over 20 million
Обама создал Obamacare, то есть систему...
Is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt because of hospital bills they could not afford?